that the existing and future DUI legal system quirks, I guess is the best word I could use, such as losing your right to trial by jury, things like that, will at some point render a lot of DUI attorneys unable to really defend their clients well?
Yes and no. They're always going to make it more and more difficult. They're always going to try to facilitate, or railroad, depending on your term of preference, cases in the DUI. There's tremendous pressure still from MAD and others to facilitate convictions. There are two things that really work in our favor. One is the police officer will always be a human and subject to human error and levels of competence and so on. That is not going to change.
Right.
Second, actually I should say there are three things. Secondly, they have proven over time, they being the governments, local governments, that they're always going to take the cheapest and easiest course.
Okay.
For example, breath machines now, instead of these big, expensive, relatively accurate in terms of some of the simpler ones, machines are being phased out in terms of the handheld units in the field that are highly inaccurate. What they call PAS or PBT devices, preliminary breath test devices, and using those in evidence. They've never been permitted evidence before, and now in Orange County and other areas of California and the country, they're being used increasingly. They're cheap, they're quick, they're easy, you get an immediate result. Never mind that they're not accurate. So that's one thing. The human body, the other factor, the human body is not going to change.
Right.
The human body will always be a very complex variable. Two human beings are not the same. You are not the same as I am in, for example, our tolerance to alcohol, our absorption of alcohol, our elimination of alcohol, the metabolism of alcohol. It's different. The variabilities biologically, such as metabolism, such as partition ratio, and perhaps we'll talk about that in a moment, I don't know, but these things are variables, and they always will be, and they'll be to a high degree unpredictable. And that's going to be the same. So the weakness of the police officer, the inability to do what he's supposedly an expert at, and the variability of the human body are always going to be factors that are going to work in your favor.
And it sounds like you're saying that the variability of the human body is as variable as I am tall to you are short, or I am fat, you are skinny, or all those things. So there's tremendous variation.
There is. For example, partition ratio. I mentioned it, I think. It's just a classic example. It's certainly not, by far not the only variable.
Right.
Essentially, partition ratio involves breath test. The breath test is not measuring the alcohol in your body, in your blood that's going to your brain. It's supposed to. That's what they want to find out, because that's what the statute says. But it doesn't. What it does is it measures the alcohol in your breath, of course. Well, that's fine, but what was it in the blood? Well, they use what they call a partition ratio. For every 2,100 parts of alcohol in the blood, there's going to be 1 part of alcohol in the breath, or vice versa. Why? Where did they get that number, that ratio? It's an average. It's an average, only an average. You could be, for example, a 1,600 or 1,500 to 1 ratio right now.
Right.
In an hour, your partition ratio may vary. It may go up to 1,800 to 1. It's going to be different from mine, and it's going to be different in you from different times. Result, blood alcohol levels on a breath machine can vary as much as 0.03, 0.04.
Wow.
So if it says you're guilty, you had a 0.10, let's say. In fact, you were an innocent man at a 0.06. Why? Why were you? Are you going to be convicted in court without a really good lawyer? Because you weren't average.
And a non-knowledgeable lawyer wouldn't even present that to the court, that there's that much variation.
He wouldn't even know what the term partition ratio means.
Right.
I mean, there was a very good, one of the original pioneers, Don Nichols in Minneapolis, one of the top DUI lawyers in the country, and was a very good friend of mine. He would, in arguing to juries, look at the jury, point to his client and says, my client is Chinese, my client is a female, and my client is dead.
Yeah.
And I'm going to prove it to you. Of course, the client is none of those.
Right.
He said the average person on the planet is Chinese. The average person is a female, and the average person died some time ago. And that's what the government is doing. My client is not average, but they're going to convict a fictitious, innocent, average man. And that's true. That's exactly true. That's what goes on.
It's a very powerful argument.
They have to deal with the defendant as an average man, because otherwise they have no idea what all these variables in that person is.